In honor of Thanksgiving, I want to lead us in giving thanks. But not just for anything, not just for normal stuff. I want to lead us in giving thanks for something that's really hard to give thanks for. I want to lead us in giving thanks for something that we really don't usually appreciate as helpful. We are most often ashamed of it. It's something we don't speak about. And yet it's something we all have in common. Failure. Let's give thanks for failure. We often talk about how difficult and hard failure can be, and it can be. It can be devastating to us when we fail at something. And yet, failure can lead to beautiful transformation. And in fact, it's only by failing that we can ever hope to change anything at all. And I offer you this original, Maine in the Autumn inspired fable to help us really start understanding what I'm trying to get to. This is a fable about the beauty of failure. Once upon a time, on a beautiful spring day, on a tree just outside this window, there was a character named Mr. Chlorophyll who started a new job. As the leaves were budding, as the tree was growing into the springtime, Mr. Chlorophyll was put in charge of the process of turning the sun's energy into food and nutrition that the tree could consume. And Mr. Chlorophyll was good at his job. He enlisted all the leaves. He got everybody acting together to all day long, all throughout the day, take in all that sunlight and all that energy, and they would work through the night, 24 hours a day. They would use those short nighttime hours to process all the energy and turn it into food for the tree. Business was booming. The tree was so proud of the job Mr. Chlorophyll was doing that the tree decided to shine all of Mr. Chlorophyll's colors all around. All of a sudden there was this proud, beautiful green that was just everywhere on this tree. They were so proud of the job that Mr. Chlorophyll and his team were doing. Production was good, times were high, everything was great, until one day when Mr. Chlorophyll noticed that production was beginning to drop. So he started checking all of his other cells in the trees, and he started reaching out to all of his limbs and roots. I don't know, insert metaphor here. And he started reaching out, desperately trying to figure out what was he doing wrong. Times had been good for so long, and now everything was dwindling. What was he doing wrong? He couldn't figure it out. And yet with every passing day, there was less and less energy being stored up in the tree. The tree was no longer that proud of Mr. Chlorophyll. His green was fading from sight. And Mr. Chlorophyll began to worry that on any given day, he might just be let go. So Mr. Chlorophyll prayed to God for guidance. Gracious God in heaven, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm failing at my job. We're not producing enough energy for this tree. It's not going to live, and I don't know how to fix it. Please, God, help me. And in came the autumn wind, blowing strong. The autumn wind showed up as a prophet of the Lord, whispering to Mr. Chlorophyll, "You've done nothing wrong. It's not your fault. The earth has tilted away from the sun. There's just less opportunity to produce energy. But this is not something to be feared. This is not a failure on your part. You've given it a real hero's effort, and we treasure the service you've given us. Now it's time for you to enter into a season of relaxation." And it's not all bad news. The good news is, as those proud green colors fade from view, they let all these brilliant and bright oranges and yellows and reds take over. When the tree lets you go, you don't need to worry. You're coming back. Your season may have passed, but there will be another season for you. God is too good to let you go completely. So relax. Enjoy a season of rest. And know that in the spring, new life will begin. And so Mr. Chlorophyll, reconciled with God, felt his anxiety melt away. He had the opportunity to take in the brilliant oranges and reds and yellows before he was finally let go. The tree went dormant, and a few months later, life began again. Failure can be devastating, primarily because we are human beings. We are proud. We have these big egos that we rely on to help us survive and get through the day. And when those egos get dinged and hurt by our failures, it's hard to notice anything else. It's hard to notice that our own shortcomings have led to the opportunity for others to shine. It's hard to notice that our work, while it is crucial and important, is not the whole story. And there are other ways of bringing life, bringing energy, bringing oneness to the world. It's not all on us all the time. In the eyes of nature and in the eyes of God, every failure is an opportunity, an invitation. With our God, every end leads to a new beginning. Failure hurts our fragile egos, but when we set our proud green colors aside, when we choose to be reconnected with our God, we find a way to live on in a challenging and different world. According to Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who literally wrote the books on the prophets, he says that all the prophets in the Bible had one goal. They had one fundamental objective, and that was to reconcile God with God's people. Abraham Joshua Heschel writes, why do the two need reconciliation? Why do the people and God need to be reconciled? Perhaps it is due to humans' false sense of sovereignty, to humans' abuse of freedom, to humans' aggressive, sprawling pride, resenting God's involvement in history. This was the prophet Isaiah's one purpose, to reconcile God's people with God. And in order to do that, Isaiah would have to convince the king of Judah to look past his own pride, to get over his own pride in his armies, his defenses, the kingdom that he had helped to build, and remind the king that God is the only one who is ultimately in charge of anything. So Isaiah preached this. This is what he said to the king. God shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. And the people shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Isaiah cast a vision for how Israel could survive the attacks from the neighboring empires by confessing their biggest failure, trusting in the pride and power of their military rather than trusting in the presence of their God. Isaiah said to the people, violence will not win the day. Violence is not enough to preserve and protect your kingdom. The only protection for Israel from now on, in God's new era of peace, is hospitality. You'll never be able to murder all your enemies. But if you turn your war weapons into gardening tools, you might be able to feed your enemies and make new friends. Isaiah's vision for this era of peace was so clear that he envisioned a little boy being born, named Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Isaiah envisioned that this boy, before he reached adulthood, would have all the kingdoms of the world at his feet. Not because he will be a great warrior, but because he will be the Prince of Peace. In Isaiah's vision for what God had in store, peace would win the day. And if the people were just to get on board and turn their war weapons into gardening tools, they might be prepared. They might be ready to live in God's new era of peace. But the king's pride was too great, his resentment too strong. He would not be reconciled with God, and he led his country into a needless war, which brought an end to the country. In our tradition, we believe that that boy, Emmanuel, God with us, we believe that that child was born in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. We believe that Jesus showed us what a kingdom based on peace, forgiveness, and second chances can look like. Jesus showed us that this way of life is the greatest threat to any kingdom that props itself up through violence, punishment, and injury. Jesus demonstrated for the entire world that our God is a God of rebirth, renewal, transformation. Jesus himself, with his own body and his own death, demonstrated for us that failure may be a threat to our pride, but it is not a threat of any kind to our God. For God, imperfection and failure are simply catalysts for change. God uses failure the way a tree uses chlorophyll, to take the energy of the universe and help us to process it into something enriching, rewarding. Failure as a catalyst for change. Here's a failure that I'm willing to be vulnerable about this morning to share with you. When I was a child, I learned that when the car is low on gas, you fill it up. And I learned that when the house is cold, you turn up the heat. And I learned that when the trash can in the kitchen gets really, really full, you're supposed to go and take it out, to put it in a larger trash can, which is then taken over to a whole pit full of trash. So as a child, I learned these ways, and my failure is the fact that I still do all that. I still put gas in my car every time it's running low, and I still turn up the heat in my house, and I still empty out the trash once a week, and I take it out whenever it's full, and I do all that despite the fact that I know we are living in the middle of a worldwide climate crisis. I'm doing all this despite the fact that I'm very aware that every choice, every action, every dollar that I spend, everything I do has a dramatic effect on creation, the environment. Children who aren't even born yet, they're all going to be paying a price because I can't find a sustainable way of managing my own life. This isn't my fault. It's not my fault that I'm failing over and over. The question for me, the question for all of us becomes, how often, how many times will we fail before we allow ourselves to help God transform the things that have let us down into things that will serve people in the future? I can hear the words of the prophet echoing in my ears this morning. I can hear the prophet asking me, what is trash? Are you sure this stuff needs to get thrown away? Or can it be reused, recycled? Can the things that don't seem to have a use today be used to create life in the future? I can hear Isaiah whispering, they shall make their garbage cans into compost bins. What is useless now will bring life in the next growing season, and they shall practice waste no more. I can hear it. The prophet is always trying to reconcile us with God. The things we're doing that are letting us down, they aren't things that we have to keep doing. If we're willing to stop being so proud and so hurt, and to know that God is dwelling with us today and in every season that is yet to come, God will help us make these transformations. Swords into plowshares, garbage into compost, fossil fuels into renewable energy, isolation into community. whatever thing you wrestle with, whatever thing has let you down, whether it be a job, whether it be an institution, whether it be a relationship, any failure you've hit, that is not the end of the story if you don't want it to be. Because God is waiting to take this failure, to take this thing that doesn't work, and show you how to transform it into something that will be of service to others. In each of our lives, we are failing at something. How long will we continue to fail before we allow God to guide us in transforming the thing that doesn't work? Perhaps each and every one of us can hear the prophet whispering in our ears. Perhaps we can hear the echo. When friends we've known forever suddenly change, when a marriage that has lasted for decades begins to come apart at the seams, when the job we've always counted on disappears, when a loved one dies and leaves us alone, when the charity that we have been giving of ourselves to for so long no longer is rewarding for our hearts and our souls and our spirits, when a tragedy strikes and our entire understanding of life is altered forever, what do we do? How do we go on? Take refuge in God. Don't see your failure as the end of the story. See it as an invitation, an opportunity to get reconnected with the divine. Practice making everything one. Notice that as your prideful green colors fade away, notice all the brilliant oranges and reds and yellows that come into play that you couldn't even see before. Acknowledge that the world doesn't center around you. That we are all a part of something grand and huge and complex. And God may be calling you to play a new part. If our faith teaches us anything, if our tradition teaches us anything, it's that God loves you enough to meet you wherever you are. And God loves you too much to let you stay there. God will wipe away our tears when we fail. And if we're willing to get past our own hurt and our own insecurities and our own fear, then we discover God is inviting us to transform our greatest failures into new life for all people. So friends, please join me in giving thanks for such a God, for a God who is so steadfast and devoted, a creator who sees us through every single season of our lives and beyond. Thanks be to God. And if you're comfortably able, please